a double degree holder from LMU, and he will be our moderator for this morning.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome back. To those of you who were here yesterday, for those of you who were not, you're in for some great papers, I'm sure. We had a great discussion yesterday. A little bit closer. And so we have 4 speakers today. We have Dr. Chapple, who just gave us an introduction, who's going to be presenting a paper, The Path to Origins, Pratiprasava. Daniel Rabe from Tel Aviv University is going to be presenting Abhinavesha, Conjugal Yoga on Life and Death. Then we have Mikkel Burley from University of Leeds, who's going to be presenting Recorded Realism of Classical Yoga. And finally, Anna Funes, who's the other professor here, the only professor I understand in yoga studies. As we heard yesterday, besides you, Chris, right?
Full-time.
Full-time, and female, and we're celebrating that, right? So she'll be closing it out for us with her paper, The Perfect Body in Classical Yoga. And so we're going to try to keep the papers and presentations to around 25 to 30 minutes, and I'll kind of give you guys a heads up if it's running over. And so, without any more delay, I'll turn it back over to Chris for The Path to Origins of Pratiprasava.
Okay, good morning. And I am very glad to have the microphone again and also to be able to share something that I've been thinking about for a long time. And my wife, who's here, said to me, well, what about your paper? And I said, I've been working on this paper for decades. I think I can figure it out. But I did do something that I told my students never to do, which is I created a PowerPoint. And again, I'm not very good at it, it's too small. But I want to be contrarian in content today. And I've identified 3 words going backwards that we will explore. And the first one is Pratiprasava, the second one is Pratipaksha, and the third one is Pratibandhi. And as we heard yesterday, Pratiprasava is an important term from the very last of the Yoga Sutras. And when Nishtala yesterday was talking about Raja Yoga and how to know God, it sent me back those many decades, and I recall finally in my first months of yoga training reading How to Know God, and coming to this last sutra. And yes, Christopher Isherwood was one of the great writers of the 20th century. And yes, that book, like Raja Yoga, was written in Los Angeles as well. But I found myself deeply moved, almost inexplicably, by reading this particular sutra. And did I understand it? No. It takes a long time to sort out all of these tattva's and the Sankhya philosophy, and I was years and years from really understanding it. But nonetheless, that baseline emotion is something to which I've returned to again and again. And I wanted to talk just slightly about methodology and a little bit about my own training. And it is essential to be a good scholar of yoga, to be a scholar of history, to be knowledgeable about culture and shifts of culture throughout history. It's essential to be a Sanskritist. And given that I encountered this first as a teenager, it's also essential, and we know this both from the phenomenologists and through feminist methodology, is that we have to admit, as we heard beautifully at the end of yesterday's session, that we're part of it. Okay? That we cannot divorce ourselves from the subjects we choose to study. So as I had, through high school, read every issue of Psychology Today and had read all of what was being written in the late 60s and the early 70s, and then read Carl Jung and Sigmund Freud. And as I went into graduate school, where I had courses in theology and psychology and theology and parapsychology, it seemed essential to define my interest of approach as an interconnection, or being grounded in an interconnection between religious experience and mysticism, theology, spirituality, and that we're really looking for some sort of meaning, as Andrew Nicholson said so eloquently. So what I'm hoping today is to give you this backwards look at three pratis. And the first one is the return to the origins of the gunas, emptied of their purpose, for the Purusha is Kaivalya, steadfastness in own form, and the power of higher awareness. And one of the most thrilling moments yesterday was Solanki. But for me, Karmadarya, or is it a Dvandva? And is this really a Dvandva, or is this, you can do one or the other, okay? And those of you who were here yesterday, you'll probably track a little bit of what I'm talking about. But essentially what I want to do is look at the notion of samskara. And samskara, fraught with klesha, predisposes our interaction with the world. And as we were walking on the bluffs, Dineshwar just said what I want to say so much more elegantly. But essentially the issue is that we are not fully present. That even if we think we know where we are, we don't always know where we are. Because we're often driven by something that remains unseen. Okay? In our graduate program, we read William James, and we read Carl Jung, and we're really looking at the motivations of shadow. And of course, we know Carl Jung studied all of this. We know that William James was an avid fan of Swami Vivekananda, and that much of what we today accept as modern psychology has roots in these insights from the Yoga Sutra and from the Bhagavad Gita. So, Klishna karma. Nitya Suchi, Dukhnatmasu, Nitya Suchi, Sukatma Kyatir Vidya, Durdarshana Shaktyor, Ekatma Tevasmita, Sukanushi Devesha, Sukanushi Raga, Dukanushayi Devesha, Svarasavahi Vidushoti Tata Vido Vinivesha. So, those five color virtually everything we do. We aren't really who we think we are, but yet we insist we know who we are. We're clouded by our attractions and our repulsions, and we just really want to keep going. Okay? Those preconditions of Klishna karma are what keep us from this state of Kaivalya. Those Klishna karmas are what keep us from the state, perhaps even more importantly, of Chitti Shakti. That there's lots of ghosts in the room, and we may say, oh, but there's only 100 people here, but no, there are thousands of people here because we carry samskaras from so many different pathways of our own immediate experience. So again, samskaras interrupt the possibility of Kaivalya. Samskaras interrupt the possibility of Chitti Shakti. And what do we do? Okay, what we are invited to do, let's just turn that off. What we are invited to do is what we do with the kleshas. And the way that we work with the kleshas is that we, again, take Pratiprasava, Heya, Sukshmaha. We trace them back through their subtlety to the origin. A fourfold process unfolds. One, understanding. Why is it that this samskara makes me do this particular thing? Two, acceptance. And that's why I do this. Three, with that acceptance comes peace. And four, and I want to demythologize all of this in a certain sense, that's those moments are the moments where we find our freedom. Okay, understanding, acceptance, peace, and freedom. Not something grand, but something quite immediate, and as we reread the Sanghakarika, something that can happen again and again and again, where Prakriti, samskaras, klishna karmas, lose their sting, lose their influence, and thereby allow us, moment by moment, to move in to that space of freedom. So what is this thing called pratipaksha? Pratiprasava, from the verb root su, is all that stuff that we spin out, su, so, like sutra, sava, and the pratiprasava is the turning back of all that stuff that we've spun out from our klishna karmas. And then it says, you do it the way that you hear, through pratipaksha bhavana. And from Dr. Grinchpan's speech yesterday, we know the significance of bhavana, the causative, one of our favorite grammatical forms. Okay? We cause things to be in a particular way. Unfortunately, when ensconced, when admired in klishna karma, it's like creepy or vaguely uncomfortable or productive of dukkha. And by the enactment of the vratas, of the yamas and niyamas, we're able to cultivate and build a different world. So I love this, one of the very longest, if not the longest, of the Yoga Sutras. It's actually quite poetic and it's staged in. The discursive thoughts, vitarka, like violence and so forth, himsa, whether done, kirta, karita, cause, anumodita, approved, consisting of lobha, krodha, moha, and if you remember the Tibetan wheel, the korva, samsara chakra, right at the heart, we have the snake, the pig, and the rooster. And this is one visual way of depicting the klishna karma operative. Lobha, love, attachment, desire. Krodha, anger, moha, delusion. Whether it's just a little bit, murtu, whether it's sort of medium, madhya, or if it's adimatra, really, really intense. It always leads, as long as we're being driven by klishna karma, endless fruits, ananta phala, in dukkha, suffering, and in ajnana, ignorance. Therefore, and I love what we said about the ittis yesterday. Here's another itti. Therefore, and that's sort of saying, you got to do pratipaksha bhavana. And you have to take an active role in redirecting your body patterns, redirecting your thought patterns, fully understanding your emotional landscape, and moving forward. Now, first pada. Remember I said this is a backwards paper. We're taking the backwards words and start with prati, and we're going from the fourth pada to the first pada. You've read the Yoga Sutra enough to know that it's a spiral text and that every pada includes a glowing description of all that yoga can bring. And as we look at the very first pada, we see that it says that there's 5 types of vrittis in their klesha, and it says that there are 25 different practices, including reflecting on happy dreams, that may be enacted in order to bring about states of clarification and purification. And there is a progression from savitarka to nirvitarka, from savichara to nirvichara. And what I'd like to suggest, going back perhaps even a little bit to Ramamurti's textbook of yoga psychology, is that in the vitarka stage, we use our practice in order, whether it be studying a text, or going for a walk, or focusing, as in the Garanta Samhita, on the Mahabhutas, not these elements, but on earth, water, fire, and space and sequence. Okay, that we use that interaction with physical realities. We could include people. Krishna and Arjuna, husband and wife, sibling, parent and child, that we use those physical realities to focus the mind. And then we discover that, no, there's not 100 people in the room, there's thousands of people in the room, and that we need to enact the next level, which is savichara, and trace back to the origin why we own the world the way we own the world. And that eventually, that which must be presented will be presented. And bit by bit, the answers to those puzzling questions will find some resolution. Heyam, dukkam, anagatam, the goal of yoga will resolve. And what happens as those glimpses of insight come, vivekakyati, as those glimpses come, they provide pratipanti. They provide a moment whereby you don't have to do it anymore. And in the Upanishads, there's a debate. Will that happen naturally just as you get more mature? I don't know. But what I do know is that some things will change with effort and with intention. This idea of going back systematically to the origins of things will result, as Andrea Jane said last night, in increased levels of health and happiness. So to summarize what we've covered here, first, the methodology, a type of spiritual psychology. I'm in the theology department at a Jesuit university, which means that our responsibility as faculty members is to tend to the formation of our students. And as I mentioned yesterday, we've been offering them yoga for decades here, and they're generally a pretty happy group. Dukkha, trauma. Okay, Stephanie's sharing with us, that we're dealing with real stuff here, the stuff of trauma. Bhavana, there's a method by which we can actively move into cultivation. Vibhuti, hats off to Mr. Grinchbot again. The Vibhuti, we must find that power within ourselves to make those changes with Shaucha and Sattva as the goal. First, Savitarka, then Nirvitarka, Savichara, Nirvichara, and back to the title. Directionality, our outward flow, our Pratipancha, is twisted by klesha, samskara, and it creates dukkha. This directionality may be reversed through Pratiprasava, through Pratipakshabhavana, and this process of reversal impedes the influence of kleshas.
Non-attachment.
And then brings them to that enduring practice of pratipana. So thank you.
So we have some time for questions, and we'll take about 10 or 15 minutes between each presentation to do that. Yesterday was very productive. Today we don't have a microphone, so if I had a conch, I would pass that around, but I don't have a conch here. So who has questions, and we'll just kind of try to keep it in order that way.
Yes,
What
please.
does the word kaivalya mean? Does it mean just calmness? Does it mean bliss state? Does it mean happiness?
Okay, it was a great day yesterday because I had to rethink not only what I think, but what I have thought and what I will think. And kaivalya finds an analog term in Kabbalah, in Jain theology. And in Jain theology, you could say either Jain, that's the Hindi modern way of saying it, or Jain, which is the Sanskrit proper way of saying it, but I like to say it both ways to keep people confused. But this term, Kabbalah, is the pinnacle of what's to be achieved in Jain theology. Now, Kabbalah is described in a very particular way of a 14-fold ascent through the Gunastanas to Kabbalah. And we're born into ignorance. We may have a conversion moment, which is the fourth Gunastana, that either we forget about and slip down to 3 or 2, or we resolve that, oh no, we really do want to, having had a glimpse, we really do want to move forward and upward. And you take the vows, you get good at the vows, you master the gross vows, you dig into the subtle, and then you can have a leap above, a backsliding moment, and then finally all of those samskaras, all of those karmas, and it's a different operative. They're described as being colorful and sticky. And the meditation process and the vow process actually leads to nirjara, where they actually go away. So those of you familiar with therapeutic touch, developed by the Theosophist Laura Kuntz and Dolores Krieger, when you work with someone's energy field, and there's this one, my wife and I trained in this, and as you get something sticky in someone's electric body, you sort of grab it and you throw it away, and then you have to do this little cleansing for yourself when you're done. Okay, that is very Jain, because they say that these are, and it's true, we all have an electric field, and we all know what it's like to be insulted and feel icky, right? And we carry that, and with Jainism, your job is to get rid of it. So at that moment of ascent, it said that you have climbed the mountaintop, and that you will dwell there forever in virya, with energy, with sat, with existence, and with ananda. And presumably, you get to look out on the other mountaintops, and you're not in heaven. You continue to look down on everything that's happening. You still have consciousness. And some people would say, as we heard in the objections, various, including Stephanie's objections, is that this could be like solitary confinement. And we also have that beautiful image that I alluded to last time, is that, yesterday rather, is that it's just great. And you walk into a Jain temple and you're in the company of the Tirthankars. And you're surrounded with 24 great teachers. You're surrounded with celebration of the innumerable siddhas who have also achieved that divine state. And it does feel a little bit more like a community than an imprisonment. So yeah, I'm grappling with that. Very good question.
For Kaivalya, actually, I am not terribly thrilled with the idea of solitary confinement. Not because I would like to look at it as some kind of better place. I'm not inspired by the paradise desire, but I think we are the ones in solitary confinement now because we have no access to. I have no access to your mind, even if you are right here. And this is the time when yoga is Pratiprasava Jnana. Like the type of knowledge, the Vishaya, direct knowledge of the object right in front of me. I don't have it. So that is at the moment of Kaivalya, that is when I'm so free that I have the direct access to your mind and I have direct encounter with an object. Otherwise, I'm always confined.
Yeah, I wanted to perhaps contribute to this discussion of Kaivalya because I wonder whether you're underplaying the radicality, the radicalness of this return to the origin of the gunas.
Can you speak up?
Oh, I can't speak loud, yeah.
Maybe a word better.
I can speak louder, is that?
Yeah, but we also like to pick up the film, so.
The mic's
if,
good.
Maybe we should
Okay,
do that next
I'll try the mic, yeah? Anything else you'd like me to do? Right, Pratiprasava, the return to the origin of the gunas. One way of understanding the return to the origin of the gunas is the complete quiescence of the gunas. And if we understand the gunas to be constitutive of the entirety of our experience, everything we experience, then it seems to follow that the quiescence of the gunas is the cessation of experience. That strikes me as a radical conception of liberation. And I'm not convinced that radical conception comes through in the idea of sort of dealing with our stuff, returning to understanding habits that we might have picked up over the years and coming to grapple with those. Because ultimately it looks as though it's the cessation of experience, and what's left if experience in its entirety has ceased, what is left? And I don't think we get a positive picture, a positive description of what's left. So hence you turn to Jainism when looking for an account of Kaivalya in response. I wouldn't know what to say about Kaivalya. It strikes me as, if I'm honest, an unintelligible concept, and that's not necessarily pejorative. I'm not meaning that pejoratively.
Yeah.
It's unintelligible.
Yeah.
I can't make any sense of it, and that's how radical it is.
And again, this is part of the genius of Patanjali in that just like he leaves Ishvara, fill in the blank, he leaves Kaivalya, fill in the blank. And so we're puzzling all these years later about it.
I'm just wondering, is it really an absence of experience? Because Swarupe would suggest there is an experience, but there's no experience of other. There's an experience of self. This is not like Nyaya and Vaisheshika, who would say that once separated from the mind, the gunas and by gunas they mean the qualities of the Atman, do not manifest, and therefore there's no chit. That's a Nyaya Vaisheshika position, that in the liberated state there's only sat, there's only consciousness, there's no chit. But in the yoga position, it seems to me, accepts that there is an experience, but it's a self-experience. It's Svarupa. And I would just like to draw attention to one little comment that could be read this way. I'm not saying we have to read it that way, but in the definition of avidya, Patanjali says, anitya, ashuchi, dukkhanatmasu, right, which is the body-mind, which is not eternal, not pure, and it's dukkha, it is suffering. But what is avidya? It's the nature that the atma, which is sukha. So here we have the possibility of the Vedanta, Satchit Ananda, Anandamaya Vyasat. I don't want to project that onto Patanjali, but it seems we have the possibility of reading, in this verse here at least, that the Atma, which is Sukha Nitya Shuchi, that it has some kind of blissfulness about it, which of course Vedanta would confirm.
Yeah, thank you very much. I would also like to return to the question what Kaivalya actually is for Patanjali. And I think that you gave an answer to this in one of the first slides that you showed, namely with regard to the last Yoga Sutra, where the expression Chitti Shakti occurred, which you translated as a higher state of mind. So returning to grammar, I would say that Chitti Shakti is a Kamadana compound, which means it is a power, a capacity which is qualified by chitti, by awareness, by consciousness. So it's not that it is the power of consciousnus which can achieve something, but a quality, capacity of being conscious. And this is the Svararupa of the Purusha, which is mentioned frequently throughout the Patanjali Yoga Shastra. And this is the aim, the self-awareness of the self, as Edwin just says. And this, I think, is the only positive description of Kaivalya that we receive from the Patanjali Yoga Shastra.
Great.
We'll take one more question.
One more. Okay.
I don't understand. Is this on?
Yes,
I'm going to give a perspective from a practitioner's point of view and a lay scholar's. I don't know Sanskrit. I don't know Sanskrit. I've been around a lot of gurus and I've read a lot. And the last 2 days I've been hearing this sort of strange spin on terms like Kaivalya and detachment, where there seems to be a conflation of sort of human experience of being alone or isolated. Whereas to me, those terms indicate not a kind of existential state of where we're located in time and space and our relationship to the rest of the world, but a state of consciousness. And as a state of consciousness, aloneness doesn't, sort of, to me, Kaivalya, terms like that, terms we translate as transcendence or non-attachment, are indicative of a state of freedom and of perfection and realization, not anything to do with something that we could call solitary confinement. Because you could be in that state of consciousness as I read these texts and be in this room and be fixing your car and be doing all the other things we do and being a householder and running a family. So I'm at a loss to understand this
Okay,
sort of.
so I'll just add a little bit of commentary. Is that I sort of reverted to Jainism. He just reverted to Kashmir Shaivism. We'll have, as many answers to this Kaivalya issue. And again, this is the genius of Patanjali, is that we learn about our own projections through reading about how projections work. And it's all good.